Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty intense. We're going to unpack the brutal realities of Roman slavery, relying heavily on some incredible research by Professor John Byron. And to really wrap our heads around this massive, complex history, we're going to look at it through the vastly different fates of two very specific men.
So let's jump right in by juxtaposing our two historical figures. These guys lived about 80 years apart over in ancient Phrygia. On the left, we have Onesimus. He's kind of like a textual ghost, right? We only know him through the Apostle Paul's letters, and his ultimate fate is a total mystery. Then, on the right, we have Zoilos. Now, Zoilos isn't remembered in any texts at all, but rather in literal stone, as this incredibly wealthy benefactor. Now, this whole perspective actually comes straight from the Biblical Archaeology Review. It is absolutely fascinating how modern excavations in cities like Aphrodisias have dragged these forgotten narratives literally out of the dirt. It just goes to show that when written history goes completely silent, physical artifacts can still speak volumes. Okay, Section 1. Two slaves, two legacies, finding footprints in ancient Phrygia. Let's look closer at how these two men left their mark.
Let's start with the story of Onesimus. He lived over in the Lycus Valley, somehow managed to flee his horrific life as a slave, and then, against all odds, crossed paths with the Apostle Paul while Paul was in prison. He actually converted and returned to his master carrying the famous text we now know as the biblical book of Philemon. But here's the profound irony of it all. Literature leaves his final fate entirely blank. We literally have no idea what happened to him after that.
Now, flip the coin, and Zoilos represents the exact opposite. He was discovered just 55 miles away in Aphrodisia. Like I mentioned, he is completely MIA in ancient literature. Yet physically, the guy is monumental. His name was carved into these massive dedicatory inscriptions for Aphrodite's temple, the agora, the local theater. The locals literally crowned him the savior and benefactor of his country.
Moving on to Section 2, the anatomy of Roman slavery, a system of status. Let's zoom out a bit.
To really understand how these men ended up where they did, we have to understand the Roman machine. Slavery was the central legal and social fabric of their entire world. But unlike more recent historical experiences you might be familiar with, Roman slavery was totally blind to race or ethnicity. Anyone, literally anyone, could become a slave. You could be captured in war or just struck by financial misfortune. It was this terrifyingly universal risk hanging over everyone's head.
Section 3. A type of social death, the brutal reality. We have to look soberly at what this actually meant for people. Modern historians use this incredibly heavy phrase to describe the system, a literal social death. It was a reality when an individual was instantly stripped of all legal standing. Family ties broken immediately. Your societal existence was completely erased.
I mean, just listen to this chilling assessment from an ancient Roman jurist in a text called the Digest. As far as concerns the civil law, slaves are regarded as not existing. We compare slavery closely with death. Just think about that. In the eyes of the empire, they quite literally weren't people.
Looking at this breakdown, you can see the absolute erasure of personal agency. The second someone became a slave, their marriage was voided. Financially, they couldn't run a business or partner with anyone. And justice? This one is just horrifying. If they had to testify in court, their words were only admissible if they were extracted through torture. No exceptions. You were sold, loaned, and moved entirely at the absolute whim of whoever owned you.
And the reality on the ground was just as bad as the law. For the vast majority, this system meant a painfully short life of unregulated brutality. Farm and mine workers dropped incredibly fast because owners faced almost zero legal restrictions. Shackling, flogging, branding, and maiming were just standard day-to-day realities. And sexual abuse was deeply embedded into this hopelessly dark existence, completely unpunished. Section 4. The path to emancipation, the loophole. Because, somehow, there was a tiny way out. So, against that absolute nightmare of a backdrop, how on earth did Zoilos manage this rare upward mobility? Well, check this out. First, he was captured in war and sold to Julius Caesar. Yeah, that Julius Caesar. When Caesar died, Zoilos was passed down to Octavian as property. Then, Octavian actually freed him. From there, Zoilos amassed immense wealth and became a huge benefactor back home. Moving from a war captive to the freedman of the future Emperor Augustus, I mean, that is an astonishing trajectory. In fact, we actually have a letter where Octavian himself wrote, "You know how fond I am of my Zoilos.
This is such a rare, personal glimpse into history. It shows you exactly the kind of top-tier, powerful connections it took for a former slave to navigate his way into a wealthy, protected life.
Section 5. The Freedman's Burden. The Catch-22 of Freedom.
But hold on, getting freed wasn't exactly a clean break. Emancipation offered potential citizenship and huge economic boosts for sure, but there was a massive catch. Freedmen were legally required to work for their former masters a set number of days every single year. So you're caught in this trap. You have new social obligations to uphold as a citizen, but you're still directly controlled by your former owner. Only now, you're entirely without the benefit of them paying for your food and shelter. Plus, the social stigma was just crushing. Aristocratic Romans generally viewed wealthy freedmen as dangerous social climbers. Even if you succeeded against all the odds, like Zoilos did, the old-money Roman elite deeply resented you. They viewed your upward mobility as a chaotic threat to their precious social order. All right, Section 6, How History Remembers, the Final Legacies. Let's bring this all together. So where does this leave us? Well, side by side we see this incredibly stark contrast. Onesimus's end remains totally unwritten. Was he freed by Philemon? Did he go on to become a bishop like some traditions claim? The historical record is frustratingly silent. But then, when Zoilos died in the 20s BCE, the people of Aphrodisias built a massive physical monument to honor him. We have this unresolved textual mystery on one side and concrete monumental validation on the other.
But listen, as we marvel at these two wild lives, it is absolutely vital to remember the broader context. For every single Zoilos or Onesimus that we actually know about, there are thousands upon thousands of men and women who never escaped, people who had absolutely no one to intercede for them and whose names are gone forever. These two men, they are the ultimate exceptions. The vast majority suffered horrific lives and just vanished from the historical record entirely.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. Reflecting on these incredible stories from the margins of ancient Rome leaves us with one really powerful, lingering thought about the archives of human memory. Who else has history forgotten? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. See you next time.